Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Common Sense Guys channel. Today, we are going to be talking with Conscious Caracal about South Africa and about how good or bad some of those things may be. So, first of all, let me introduce Conscious Caracal. How are you doing again? Or may I now call you Ernest?
You can call me Ernest, man. I mean, it's pretty much common knowledge now. But yeah, thanks for having me on again. As we were talking about off air, it's always nice to be able to talk to someone on the ground in a country that a lot of people are interested in, but don't quite know all the facts about. So it's easy to speculate and think about all types of conspiracy theories or like theories about what's going on in South Africa. But then you actually talk to someone on the ground and your entire view is shattered in terms of what's really going on. I'm speculating this because that's what's happened to me talking to people in other countries and realizing I actually don't know what's going on in their countries. I was just basing it on false information. So that's my mission, is to clear up the waters a bit. And that's why I always begin my YouTube videos with greetings from the dark continent, to shine some light on the goings on down south, because it is a dark continent in terms of information. People don't know what's going on here, and I hope I can shine some light on it. But thanks for giving me the opportunity and the platform.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I appreciate you coming on and being able to do that yourself, my friend. Though I do have to completely and utterly agree with you on that note, that looking at it from an outsider's point of view, if we were to take all the idea of what was happening from the UK's point of view, or even US's point of view, all of the information that is, let's say, spewed out by the national media about what we think is true and what isn't, and how much locally we know it's not, how is it going to be sorted out by somebody internationally being able to look at that and go, yeah, that's not true. That sort of is. That isn't. Because that's exactly where we are at the minute. We can now collaborate between each other and be able to find out that, well, no, that is true, but that bit isn't. This did happen at that time with that person, but that didn't. And I'm very happy with the internet on that sort of aspect of things, because we don't need the media on that aspect of it anymore. We can talk to each other and find out what the fuck is going on. And as you said before, off air, non-politically, apolitically, just the bare facts and bare minimum.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and I just wanted to elaborate for people to try and
but
look at it from a different point. So I appreciate
it.
Thank you.
That's how I keep describing myself, man. I'm just a regular guy. I'm just observing the world around me and trying to describe it the best I can. And I see some familiar faces in the chat that I haven't seen in a while, but I do remember the usernames, especially Jensen Quinn. He used to be one of the big moderators on my channel before Google Hangouts was discontinued, and I have to figure out a new streaming software first. But I'll be back to streaming very soon again.
Yeah. No, I can't wait for that. I enjoy when you do your live streaming. I enjoy the conscious thought that you get, because don't get me wrong, I like watching your videos, but you can tell that they're not a conscious stream of thought, though they would have been at the time, but they've now been edited and cut. I prefer how you get to that point of view rather than just the edited version of it. But then again, that's just me. Everybody's different. Some people like the polishness of it.
No, I remember Jay Wiley's series as well. I see you asked in the chat if I remember him. No, I remember the profile picture and the username. But yeah, I think we can jump right into the big story. This is something I actually sent you in a DM because I thought it would shock you just as much as it shocked me.
And it fucking did.
So maybe you can throw that on the screen, and actually, if someone is unaware, so they can see what's up.
Yeah, so before we actually play this, why don't you give a little bit of context behind this? Because obviously we can see that Soleimani's in the background, and we can see some people in red. What does that symbolize? Is that a political party out there, or any sort of thing that's out there before we carry on?
So what's happening here is this is pretty much a protest in front of the American embassy in South Africa. It's in Pretoria. And what you're seeing in front of you is a conglomerate of people from three different factions or three different parties. Firstly, the South African Communist Party in red, and also COSATU, who are the labor unions. And then also the ruling ANC is also there. You'll see one of their flags now, and you can see the people in yellow, also the ANC. But something very interesting, and I'll get into it after the video, is the relation between these three parties. This isn't some just trivial get-together. They are actually they form part of something called the tripartite alliance. So I'll get into that after the video. So that's pretty much what you're seeing here, is they are protesting America's actions against Iran. They're standing in solidarity with the Iranian regime. And they are calling what Donald Trump and the Donald Trump regime and America did an act of war, or a declaration of war, even is what the words they used. And this is what they're protesting now. So just for context, this is in front of the American embassy, and we know how the Americans feel about their embassies. And I think that context is going to make it much more shocking once you hear what they're singing.
What we're going to do is, as well, we're going to play the whole clip. It's only a 20-second clip, so we're not going to cut in. We're just going to play the whole clip and just let everybody hear what's being shouted and screamed.
That's 100%. Right, so if you just pause it there, you'll see it now. There on the right of your screen, there's the ANC flag as well, the ruling party. And yeah, so they're pretty much singing One American, One Bullet, which is now, for context, a variant of a song that is sung by radicals in South Africa and by just anti-white racists, where they sing One Settler, One Bullet. So they've just changed that song around for this context.
Yeah, I mean, just the bits that you can actually hear. I mean, as Conscious just said, you can clearly hear them say one bullet, one American, or one American, one bullet. Now, as you quite rightly said, with the fact of it being so close to the US Embassy, and remembering that the US Embassy, like any embassy, is sovereign land to that nation. So if it was a UK embassy, then it would be sovereign land to them. So anybody that, like they did in Iraq when they invaded it, is what it is, an invasion on sovereign land. So, yeah, it doesn't seem too peaceful, at least on the rhetoric side. Maybe on the actual interactions, but generally it doesn't seem to be peacefully minded, should we say?
Yeah. So let me give some valuable context now and go a bit more into what's happening here. So firstly, what you need to understand is this is not some fringe group. This is not some like tiny group of radicals. They represent the ruling tripartite alliance. So the tripartite alliance is an alliance between the ANC, the African National Congress, and COSATU, who are the labor unions, and then the South African Communist Party. And they form an alliance in the South African Parliament pretty much it's a symbiotic relationship where the South African Communist Party pretty much forms the ideological backbone of the National Democratic Revolution that the ANC seeks to achieve. They pretty much are the brains of the operation, you can put it that way. COSATU are the labor unions, so they are actually of big benefit to the ANC because they know how to organize people. They know how to organize labor unions. They know how to rally up support. So this helped the ANC specifically in the 90s when they had to try and get a majority on their side. They needed this type of alliance to organize people, because you have to remember the ANC weren't a political party that was like organizing a lot of people very effectively for long. They were exiled and they were not organizing a lot of people. So they needed that type of organization to be able to get a lot of support in, and that's what they use COSATU for. And then the ANC pretty much speaks for itself. It's the ruling party. It's the party of Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, and now Cyril Ramaphosa.
See, from what Sideliner has just put up, well, I just put up, but what he put into the chat, I think is actually quite an important topic, actually, very important. Simple fact is that I like to do my own type of research, and I'm not sure that I was aware as how big that the South African Communist Party actually is, and a benefit
Mm,
to the ANC to support it. I had no idea actually how, let's
mm.
say, beneficial that the Communist Party is to the ANC. Because without them, as far as I can work out on the maths, they wouldn't actually be in power, would they?
Well, it's the relationship has changed a lot since the 90s. In 1994, or in the build up to 1994, the South African Communist Party played a lot bigger role in getting the support for the ANC. Nowadays, their roles have changed a bit. It's no longer just a way for the ANC to get support. The South African Communist Party is pretty much the ANC's, like I said, ideological brain. It pretty much gives the ANC its ideological foundation through their pursuit of the NDR, which is the National Democratic Revolution, which is pretty much how they want to turn South Africa into a communist state through first achieving socialism. So today, the role of the South African Communist Party is less the role that it played in the 90s for gaining support, and it's much more of an advisory and like an ideological rudder for the party, and keeping it on track, basically. So that's their contemporary role in 2020, or in the past, I don't know how long, in the past few years. They've turned into more of an ideological basis and an ideological advisory role for the ANC, and keeping the ANC ideologically coherent, you can put it that way.
So for me, just looking from the outside in, obviously trying to let's say stillman the position that's just been put out there, would you say that what seems to be is that because so many people would necessarily be just completely straight up against voting for the Communist Party, that what they've done is now put the ANC as let's say the shop window dressing, and then is actually still producing and propagandizing from that position, as in should we say a backer, like a financial backer type thing, like they're in the background rather than being in the foreground.
Yes, the ANC. Well, it's. I should have actually sent you some of these links beforehand, but I'll get some now. Like the South African Communist Party is not secretive. It's not something that's like being hidden. I know what you mean by your point, but just to add a little footnote to it, it's not something that South Africans are not aware of. Well, some South Africans are not really aware of it. But for example, there are a lot of pictures just from this. I think it was this year or it was end last year, where the president of South Africa is standing at the celebrations of the Communist Party. I don't know how many years they were celebrating, but he's standing there with a bunch of hammer and sickles in the background. Very, very ominous, and actually almost looks like a photoshopped image. And then also what you need to understand, and this is the real kicker, they do have a lot of influence. I mean, you have to remember South Africa's Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, is a communist, like open communist. It's not like something that's been leaked or something that's rumored. He calls himself a communist. That if you ask him on the street, what are you? You will say, I am a communist. And he was our minister. He's our Minister of Finance.
So I suppose to reiterate my point, so taking an example, an analogy, if you will, some people would never vote for Labour, but they would vote for the Lib Dems instead. I'm guessing that's kind of similar to what happens with the Communist Party to the ANC, that they won't openly vote for them because, the name's there, but they vote for the ideas because it's somebody else's in their mind.
No, just before I get to that point, I misspoke. It's Pravin Gordhan was our Minister of Finance before he was replaced, I think last year, by Tito Mboweni. Tito Mboweni is a bit more free market orientated, but he's pretty much, as I see it, used specifically for window dressing, in terms of he can talk to the international investors and calm them down and say, no, South Africa is still going to be responsible in their finances and responsible in terms of safeguarding international investments. But then the ANC doesn't follow through with their policies. But your point about where people vote, pretty much a vote for the ANC is a vote for the South African Communist Party and for COSATU. It's pretty much a package deal. It's not, you don't hear about people that vote for the South African Communist Party, seeing as the South African Communist Party and COSATU don't run in elections. They don't run in the South African elections. They're pretty much just in this relationship with the ANC, this parasitic relationship, if you will. And they don't have to run because they get all the influence they want and they get all the power they want as long as the ANC wins. So they just work as arms of the ANC. You can classify them as parties, but they don't contest in the elections. They pretty much are just this package deal. Like, for example, if you get a cable TV package, some channels are just included.
Yeah. No, I completely get that, and that's very well put down as an analogy. I suppose, as you said before, that you now have, well, not now, but from my understanding of it being enlightened to me, or illuminated, should I say to me, that you now have the say a trihorn or trifecta, so to speak, as in you have your ANC, you have your Communist Party, and like you would do here with the Labour Party, you have the unions, the labour unions out there, which surprisingly always goes with the communists, which, surprise, surprise. Does that actually play a massive role where they would actually be organising the people to be able to vote or to protest? Are they the ones that are actually got the, let's say, the people on the ground, the boots on the ground aspect to the political party, the let's say the trifecta?
Yes. Yes, no, definitely. Specifically COSATU. I mean, COSATU is pretty much the Labour arm of the ANC. They spearhead all types of the pretty much the labor movements in South Africa. So they are pretty much, they keep the ANC's grip on all the labor movements and make sure that all the unions toe the line when it comes to who to vote for and who their members should be voting for. And there's definitely a lot of pressure being put on their members to just make sure you cast the right vote, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So, and like I said, the South African Communist Party lobbies less. They don't hold like huge rallies, and if they'll do something like, for example, what they did now at the embassy, where they do an ideological display almost, but they're not going to like gather somewhere and just talk about their ideology. Their role, like I said, specifically is more to just give the ANC guidance and to make sure the ANC stays on track and stays ideologically coherent and pretty much stays true to the course of what their mission was, and that is to create increased state centralization, to shrink the private sector, and pretty much spread state control into every facet of the South African society. And that's what we're seeing now. Now, something that we are seeing on the horizon, well, two big things. Firstly is expropriation without compensation that we can get into now. But the other thing that's also pretty much now being seriously considered, and it's already been through Parliament, is the NHI bill. So it's the National Health Insurance. Basically, the state wants to nationalize all healthcare and make everyone use nationalized healthcare, and you as a Brit will know a lot about it, but you will also understand that it's not all sunshine and roses.
It's not all it is cracked out to be. It's not good for everybody, but you know, it is what it is.
Especially if you throw an incompetent and corrupt government like the ANC into the mix, then I don't think you're going to bet on that horse.
No, I agree with you on that one. Though before that we do go into those specific policies, I would like to just quickly pull it back a little bit and just go to the point of, if these trifecta groups that are now protesting, so to speak, what's going on with America and, you know, one bullet, one American, so on and so forth, is it now a case that it's still that type of ritual that still, or anger or hostility between races in general that seems to be going on there, or is that just an over politicized point from outside looking in?
I think what we're seeing here is more of less the racial element and more the ideological element of the ANC coming to the fore. I'll get you some examples now of, for example, the types of conspiracy theories that the ANC peddles. Very, very vehemently anti-West. For example, when when was it? It was 2 years. I'm trying to get my math right because I have to remember it's 2020 now, no longer 2019. But I think it was 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. No, it was 2 years ago. They went to the ANC sent a party of delegates to Venezuela to show our support for Mr. Maduro over there, and to pretty much denounce the Western imperialists that were destabilizing that country and smearing his good name. So, and we also we even offered to give troops to Venezuela to help them fight the imperialists, and I think the Americans are really shaking in their boots there. So yeah, that's the first thing. Second thing, ANC, big fans of Mao Zedong. Pretty much speaks for itself. But then also very vehemently anti-America. They are big friends of the Iranian regime. They strongly back the Iranian regime. And after the pretty much what we now refer to as the shortest world war in history, World War III, after that, all those happenings, the ANC didn't waste any time to come out in support of the Iranian regime and condemn the imperialists that were trying to destroy that country. And then as well, you also see them very vehemently anti-Israel. Pretty much always, every chance they get, call Israel an apartheid state and talk about how it's actually Palestine. And I mean, you know all the rhetoric. So, I mean, it's a pretty, and also very big friends of Cuba. Cuba is one of our big buddies in the world. Yes, South Africa just knows how to pick its friends. And then also
Before you carry on, I really wanted to pick up on the ideological points of, I can understand why they'd be picking certain countries. As in, I can understand why they would pick Venezuela. I can understand why they would pick Cuba, why they would like some communist dictators from China and so on and so forth. What I can't understand is, why in the blue hell would they support Iran, apart from it being religious?
No, it's pretty much them forming into their sphere of the world. So you have to, that's why I list all the allies of South Africa, because these allies all stick together. All these countries that I just listed are also the countries that backed Iran coincidentally in this fight. And it's because you have this band of ideologically bound countries that ideologically pretty much say the same thing, but they also have formed this little global gang that back each other when anyone attacks them, especially the Western imperialists, as they would like to say. And you also, and that's what I was getting to, you also can't underestimate the role of China. China is one of our big buddies. And China is also has a lot of interest in not having regime change in Iran. So it also makes sense. So you can, if I can boil it down to a very simple analogy, it's pretty much this group of guys that are mates, and one guy gets dissed, and then all the other guys like fucking puff up their chests and defend him and like surround him and make sure that his honor is defended. And I think this is what we're seeing here, just on a much larger scale. Is you have this band of ideologically bound countries, and they will back each other no matter what. And I mean, you could say the same thing to some extent about the Western countries as well. I'm sure if the same type of critiques or attacks were being like I'm talking about verbal attacks and like criticism was being flung at England, I would definitely assume America would have your back, just out of principle, out of the alliance that between the two countries. And I think that's what we're seeing here. It's pretty much, and I think this is the last little footnote I'd like to add, it's pretty much South Africa trying to kiss up to its bigger friends and saying, you guys are playing these big roles on the global stage, I can play too. They're pretty much mimicking the Iranians when they chant death to America. So the South Africans were like, yeah, well, we've got a song of our own, and they just wanted to like join in on the bandwagon. So it's definite, but it is definitely a more complex issue. But I think that is the foundation of it. I think that is the basic gist of what's going on here, is that you have these countries that are allies.
So what I got from what you just said is that the ideological bounding, so to speak, seems to be the point of, especially from Iran's case, just singling out Iran, doesn't seem to be a case of it being political ideology, as in we're so aligned politically with these people. It seems to be more of a fact of it being a anti-ideological stance, as in we are anti-Western. We don't want any part of the westernized world, so on and so forth. That seems to be where the ideological banding and coming together seems to be, at least in my mind, for the Iranian side anyway.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's not fueled. It's fueled more by opposition to something than camaraderie around something. It's definitely fueled more by an anti-Western sentiment, because they are the countries within this alliance that is loosely banded alliance that I listed. They're not ideologically identical.
No.
I don't think Iran is, for example, a communist country. But they do have, they're a theocracy, but they do have a lot of overlap. But if you look at the global chessboard, it makes perfect sense, because then you have this alliance of people that are pretty much that frame the West as an oppressive force and imperialist, and needs to be pretty much stopped and resisted wherever we find them. So I think that's what we're seeing definitely here, is more, as you aptly pointed out, we're seeing much more of a geopolitical thing going on here than just a purely just ideological approach to it.
Yeah. Do you think, as you tried to allude to before I tried to jump in, do you think that is purely a case of trying to show to themselves that they are part of the geopolitical stance, that they can hang with the big boys, so to speak, and try and cozy up with, I suppose, China more than anybody, and Iran, because they would have more of an influence worldwide than what the other countries that you mentioned would do, simply because of the geopolitical impact anybody that supports China would get.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a display of support and a display of loyalty. They're showing that if China, for example, if Chinese interests are threatened, then we will also back you. But it's not just China. It's more of this entire huge alliance that we're seeing, this anti-Western alliance, basically. And I think pretty much this is the equivalent of, for example, when you have like a handsome guy that gets all the girls, and he has this one pretty average-looking orbiting guy, and he is just like kissing this guy's ass all the time, hoping to get some scraps. And I think that's what we're seeing here. But I don't think the world is really quaking in their boots. But that doesn't diminish the fact that you can't go stand in front of an embassy of a country and threaten those people with death. It doesn't matter how incompetent your government is or how small your military might is. You can't just then downplay the fact that you went in front of an embassy and said you're going to shoot people.
Yes.
Based specifically just on their nationality.
Well, as you said, nationality. I do find that exceptionally interesting, how the ideology of the ANC and the other two people that are with the ANC seem to be pushing the anti-Western point, and seems to be the old point of any propaganda, especially from, let's say, using Nazi propaganda, as if you know that the country is falling apart, what you do is, instead of pointing the finger inwards and self-critique, you point it outwards to go, no, the only reason why we're failing is because of this, because of them, because of these people, because of their ideology. And it seems like they're not actually doing any sort of politics that seems to be, right, we're going to actually help you guys by doing this. It's all America's fault. It's all Europe's fault. It's all this, it's all that.
There's some sinister force. A third force.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it seems really interesting to me that anybody that seems to go along those sides of ideological standpoints, as in communism or socialism, always has to portray somebody as being the bad guy. Socialism was always the case of the people that own the means of production. They're the ones that are putting you down. They're the ones that are stopping you. Nothing to do with the fact that they actually have governments that are actually backing them and forcing them to do certain things. But that doesn't matter. It's all them. And I find that interesting, that any sort of form of, you can do the same thing with any other politics. I'm not just saying that it's this way or one way, but it seems so evident and so forthright that that's what they're doing. But yet the people that are actually protesting don't actually seem to understand or even want to, because they're so I want to say indoctrinated, but I don't want to use that word because I don't think that they're actually that intelligent with their points. I just think they drum it into them.
No, it's very interesting that you bring up the Nazis, seeing as there's a lot of parallels between the type of rhetoric you see in South Africa and that as well. For example, something I always use as an example that shocks people, but it is shocking, is if you look at the ideology of BEE in South Africa, or affirmative action that we have, BEE specifically, Black Economic Empowerment, where if you want government benefits or if you want to get tenders, your business needs to have a certain race quota. You need to have a certain amount of Black people working for you, or else you're disqualified. And the whole basis, the ideological argument around this type of policy is that the people that are running companies and the people working for top companies are not representative demographically of the country at large. Now, where have you heard this rhetoric before?
No.
It's pretty much exactly the idea that the Nazis propagated, that if you look at all these newspapers and you look at all these top companies, who are in charge? Oh no, it's not Germans. And then there's a quote specifically. I don't want to quote it because I'm probably going to misquote it, but I think it was Joseph Goebbels said exactly the same thing. He said something along the lines of the Germanic element is almost completely absent from like top ranking positions or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much exactly what you hear from the ANC, where they take this very hardline nativist approach that if the people that are CEOs and the people that are the head of media houses and the people that are running companies like state-run enterprises are not perfectly representative of the demographics of the country, then it doesn't it's not moral and it's not how things should be. And that's why it's a nice segue into actually the rolling blackouts, the whole Eskom thing that we're experiencing, because now you have this power utility, Eskom. Pretty much all South African energy is coming from a state-run organization or a state-run enterprise. And we are experiencing for the past, we've been since 2008, we've been experiencing rolling blackouts, but not like constantly. So we'll go a few months and then we'll have a month where we have a lot of rolling blackouts and then it'll stop again and whatever. Always strange enough, the rolling blackouts and the power cuts coincide with when the Eskom employees are demanding raises or bonuses, but that's just a coincidence. And then they always blame like wet coal or whatever. But what happened with Eskom is that in the past 20 years, but specifically in the early 2000s, tens of thousands of white engineers were pretty much shown the door because it wasn't demographically representative. So a huge exodus of people, highly skilled individuals, just were pretty much shown the door at the company, and they all went overseas and they went to work in other countries now as highly sought after skilled individuals. And it's a case of where ideology came first, not merit and competence, where we don't have a good enough school system to produce enough engineers that we can fill in these positions so that we can just instantly have this demographically representative SOE. It doesn't work like that. It takes years. It's not something that's just going to happen. But the ANC wants, for propaganda purposes and for pretty much their rhetoric, they want it now. They want within the next 10 years, we need to have the people running this energy enterprise need to be demographically representative. And while they were pursuing their ideology, they pretty much didn't care about merit. And a lot of people were just put into positions because of their connections to government and because of who they knew and who their family were. And that's the big flaw. Excuse me?
So pure nepotism, pure cronyism.
Yes. And that's the big flaw with, for example, in South Africa, at least, the affirmative action and Black economic empowerment, is that it has just become a vehicle to promote and put people in positions that are politically connected. It's not about justice. It's not about actually getting somewhere. It's about using it as a very specific tool to just put people that are connected and people that know the right people into positions. And these are people that are not fit for their positions. For a good example now, so the head of Eskom this year was appoint a new head of ESCOM, which is something that almost happens every month. But just to give you some context, it's really bad.
Performance that bad.
It's really bad. So they appointed a new head of ESCOM this year, and he's a white guy, so it was very controversial. But then you need to put it into context. Before they appointed him, 32 black guys refused the position because they didn't want to be the head of this train wreck of a fucking company. So he was the 33rd choice.
Fuck no. Flip over gave us 35 ZAR. I have no idea what that equates to, but they said, love the show, keep it up. So we're obviously doing something well, so that's a good thing. But to quickly jump back onto what you said, so you were saying that basically there's only now one energy provider, so to speak. So technically that can't be an enterprise by definition, because you need more than one, but besides the point. But it's amazing that when you do have something that's completely nationalized and you don't have any competition, how people can keep on asking, as you quite rightly alluded to, for higher and higher wages, but yet not actually provide a decent enough service, simply because there's no competition to counteract that service.
No.
I find that interesting with the idea of nationalizing anything.
I'm just gonna get that stat. It's fucking incredible. ESCOM. I'm just gonna get the year right now, because the amount of bonuses compared to So I think yes.
So a national company. I'm just going to talk over while you're looking.
Yeah.
So you're saying that in a national company that's providing energy, that's supposed to be a national provider, a utility, is operating itself like a bank, and how a private bank would operate, where you actually have a point of them being paid probably millions for bonuses, where they're not even providing a decent enough service to be able to warrant the bonuses in the first place. Because to be able to get a bonus, you need to actually provide a decent service, don't you?
So here it is. So I have to get the numbers because it's so mind-blowing. So over the past 11 years, so since 2008, pretty much, since the rolling blackouts have started, the energy crisis has not been solved. We've had year-on-year rolling blackouts every year, but tariffs for ESCOM have increased 500% in that 11-year period.
That's amazing. For a service that is obviously and must obviously be depleting by the fact of having more and more blackouts, or as you said, rolling blackouts. That's just amazing. A 500% increase in a tariff, paying for something that has a complete and utter monopoly over it by definition, and is just saying, well, pay us the money or you don't get your energy, even though you're not getting your energy after you pay it.
That's why I'm saying it's such a weird coincidence that every time they want to hike the tariffs, rolling blackouts start. It's very, very strange. But that's the position we're in, man. And there doesn't seem to be a solution anytime in the future. But so the government likes to blame wet coal and saying like, no, but the coal got wet this year and that's why we can't burn it and whatever. But I think the deeper issue really is what we call carded deployment, where it's the entire SOE. Okay, so just I don't know if I've clarified. SOE stands for state-owned enterprise. So the entire SOE of ESCOM is pretty much the socialists' wet dream. It is just the centralization of energy, and there is no competition. You are actually disincentivized from putting up like solar panels and things on your house, because then you have to adhere to extra regulations and pay extra taxes and whatever. So it's not even like they're trying to solve the problem through telling people you can please generate electricity in some other manner. Like, no, you are only going to get electricity from us, and you are going to pay more every year.
Sorry, I was just working something out. So they want to pay you a 500% increase over the 11-year period, when they come to a point of actually saying, well, look, you can use solar panels, but what we're going to do is when you're providing your own energy for your own abode, we're going to actually charge you more because somehow you're using more energy.
And we're going to regulate the shit out of it.
That seems logical.
Yeah, but it all makes sense once you see what the role of ESCOM actually is. The role of ESCOM is to have that iron fist, basically, that power over energy. Because if you control energy, and that's why they want to control the healthcare as well, it's one of the integral pieces to the South African centralized government project, is that firstly, that you control energy completely. And if you control that tap, you have a lot of power over people, excuse the pun.
Well, no, he's exactly as it is. The same as the water and the water shortages that you had, obviously, as we talked about last year.
Yes.
If it comes to a point of them completely and utterly controlling the distribution of the water as well, you're all fucked. Because if they don't want to feed the farmers, as we've gone through before, and they want to, make a point of saying, well, you're not giving us the land, so we're not going to give you the distribution of water because we're not going to enrich the pipes in your area. What can you do? You can't go somewhere else. You can't do anything else. You can't go against the government because you're on your own. How the hell are you going to be able to do anything against that? I suppose what you've done before, though, when you've built some different communities or helped build different communities, is the basis for that or the idea behind that, I'm guessing?
Yeah, that's the entire inspiration behind what we call self-determination, but in a very specific South African sense, seeing as that word has become tainted in foreign circles. Here, it just means getting off the government tap and getting yourself independent from the government teat and being able to support yourself and your family and your community and being as independent and off the grid from the government as possible. And this doesn't mean being a doomsday prepper. It just means doing simple things, like, for example, organizing to have, for example, a community watch or a community patrol to take safety back into your own hands, to have to help each other organize to be able to put up solar panels and deal with the costs and deal with the regulations to become more energy independent. That's another thing that you can do. Other things you can do is, for example, where the state-run healthcare is not as good, you can organize as a community and start supporting and assisting each other with basic medical stuff. So that's pretty much the philosophy that's taking South Africa by storm, I would say. A lot of people are catching on to it, and that less government is better.
Yeah. Well, I think from my own point of view, any sort of form of government that has monopoly over anything is always going to be a government that is going to force their opinion and force their rule onto anybody. But if you're going to go to the point of being able to take away their power of energy, take away their power of controlling water and utility, take away their power of being able to have clinics, and I use that term as loosely as possible because otherwise it then becomes something else. But as clinics and things like that, if you can take away that power, then you're now in control of your own self. You're now in control of where you go, and you do not have to rely on actually voting for or participating in government. Now, people would maybe argue that maybe that's a foolhardy way of looking at things because you're always going to have to participate in some forms of situations and whatnot, or just be taken over in general. But if you don't start making a stand and showing people that there is a different way, even by an ideological point, as in, well, look, if we have private energy, we can counteract the energy problem. If we have private water utilities, we can counteract the government problem. And once you start doing stuff like that, I think that kind of makes people wake up and realize that there is a different way. And I think that's the best point of what you're doing.
No, exactly. And just something you can tell all your far left oaks that you encounter there in Britain, you can tell them, move to South Africa, man. It's the socialist paradise, man. Honestly. The thing about socialism is it works until you run out of power, and then you sit in the dark with candles. So if they want to, if that's really their thing and they want to experience it, tell them to immigrate here. I think they'll love it here. State controls everything. They want to give you free healthcare. They want to give you free education. That's something they're also working on. They want to pretty much run it like a dream. So I think they're missing out living under all that oppression in Brexit, post-Brexit England or Britain. I think they should just come here. I think they'll love it.
Yeah, I think I think Margaret Thatcher said it best. Socialism works very well until you run out of other people's money.
Yeah, that's the one I put a twist on with the power.
Yeah. I got you. But no, it is completely and utterly correct on that one. If people are honestly thinking that socialism is a good way where you have monopolies of nationalisation, then all you have is whatever government is in power, whatever government has decided and how they decide to run things or put money up or whatever, is now the only thing that you can do. It is, by definition, a form of tyranny, simply because you have no other choice. If you're going to have to try and look for another form of energy, you're going to have to pay throughout the nose to be able to get it, because you're just being completely and utterly, as you said, tariffed off of it, because you just can't do it unless you're rich. And, you know, in a socialist fucking country, that doesn't work.
So just for curiosity, our government actually, when they want to do the NHI, the socialized healthcare here, they actually reference Britain quite a lot. Now, do you have a private option when it comes to healthcare in England? Or is everything socialized?
We have, I believe it's around about a 7 to 10% option of private. Now, that doesn't mean that we have a good selection. But
and it's probably very expensive.
I wouldn't know, because I haven't used any of the private. Now, I've used some of the facilities in a private section because the NHS pays for it when they're overrun. Now, take that for what you will, that the NHS is paying the private people to send more NHS patients there. But, you know, leave that one right there. But yeah, the facilities are always much better. The people always seem much more helpful, simply because they're less overworked. Because any form of a national health service, you always have the people overworked, understaffed, because it's everything about saving money for getting the most money. So yeah.
It's that classic story that you got from Soviet Russia, where you get these stories of people having like coffee shops, and there's still a line of like 50 people standing in line for coffee, and then the person just closes the shop and he says, I work till 5. I don't care how many coffees I sell. I work from 8 till 5. After 5, I'm done.
Well, that's exactly it. Because if you're getting paid by time and not paid by product, then productivity then fails. Because if you like you said, have got the line of people that are wanting coffee, and you can see there's 100 people, and you know you got coffee, let's say at $2 to make it even easier.
I'm going to work another hour, dude. I want to make some cash.
Well, exactly. You're going to easily make at least $200 on that if it's a case of it being £2 per coffee, and you have 100 people waiting outside. Now, if you're only getting paid per time, you don't give a shit how many people are there. You're going to just fuck off. Productivity has no point of value at that instance, because everything's on a handout system. The handout system is always going to fail, because you have to put into the system to get out of the system. And if you have nothing going into it, you're going to run out of money fucking quickly.
So just a final point maybe on what's happening, and then I'll give you some predictions on what I think is still to come this year in South Africa. So just last week we heard that the ANC now has changed their tune on land expropriation, but in a more sinister way, not in a positive way. They said now that their first narrative was that they said that the courts will still have a final say when it comes to the value of land, which farms can be expropriated, which land can be expropriated. The courts will have a lot of power and influence. Now, this week, they said, no, that was just a little fake clause we put into the bill. The bill to amend the constitution. We want all the power. We want complete say about what the value is that we're going to pay if we pay compensation. And in the cases where we don't pay compensation, we want to say we want that, we want that, we want that. So that's been the big debate now in South Africa, is this bait and switch that we've seen here now. And definitely, and I think this is the segue into my predictions for the year for South Africa, for people on the outside looking in. I really appreciate everyone just giving a little bit of their time to studying what's going on. You're just trying to keep up to date.
Or did you want to go into the president of your president telling the UN that there is no farm attacks?
How long is your show? I thought shows are usually like 1 hour, so I'm
I
working
normally
on
do
that.
an hour and a half to 2, but
No,
I'm quite
no,
happy
that's not a
going
problem.
to an hour and a half.
So okay, so then you should probably show that clip that I sent you, and then you'll have a better context for. I'll maybe just give the context before you play.
Sure, no problem. I'm almost ready. I know what I'm doing. I swear. I think it's that one. Yep. There we go. There we go. Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct. Right, we're all happy. Right. Did you want me to just play it straight away, or do you want to give context?
So just for context, this was after, so AfriForum, the South African civil rights organization that I work for, went to the United States to spread facts about what's happening in South Africa, give the numbers, answer people's burning questions. And then afterwards, Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, went to the US to, what was it? I can't remember what event it was. I think it was something by the UN. I know it was the UN that organized it. And he was talking to Bloomberg here, and he said they asked him about the tweet that Donald Trump made, that famous tweet that Donald Trump made about South Africa, where he said he's going to monitor what's happening there, and specifically the land grabs. And here in this clip, Cyril Ramaphosa gives his response to those issues of farm murders and land grabs.
Just if anybody wanted to take a couple of seconds just to read that tweet, just so you know in context what he's actually talking about. I know Ernest actually mentioned it, but that is the exact tweet that they're talking about at this point about land sieges. So that's exactly what they're talking about in context. So I've talked to you before about that issue. I'm pretty sure that you had some evidence and that before about how much is actually being killed, murdered, and being done. So why are you coming out and saying that there's no evidence of it?
And here's the thing: I'm fully open to accept that and willing to engage in a debate regarding the numbers and debating how serious the matter is and how much attention it deserves. But this takes it to a next level. This is not just, but it's not that big. It's not that big a deal. This is completely, it's not happening. No murders of white farmers, no land grabs. But if you Google South African land grab, you get mainstream sources like the New York Times reporting on it. So that pretty much sealed. I mean, the most damning story was actually a very sad one. So the New York Times, it was last year. The New York Times there was a land grab that happened in a small university town called Stellenbosch. I actually spent some time there. I studied there for 4 years. And there was a land grab just outside of Stellenbosch on a wine farm where hundreds of people just moved onto this farmer's land and started erecting buildings there and shacks and stuff. And then the New York Times went to talk to them. And pretty much the farmer said this is illegal. He's tried to talk to authorities. They're not really helping. It's a very bad situation. And there's a video of one of the protesters and one of the land grabbers saying something along the lines of, we are going to keep this land, and this is our land, even if someone has to die. And then they interviewed the farmer, the New York Times, and he said that he feared for his life. He's been receiving threats, and there's been a lot of threatening stuff happening to him. And then a few months later, that farmer was murdered. He was murdered on his farm. And it was reported on. Both stories were reported on by the New York Times. You can, I think it's anyone that is really curious about like the full details. I think if you type in New York Times Stellenbosch land grab, you'll get the first one. And if you Google New York Times Stellenbosch farmer murdered, you'll get the second one. And it's chilling stuff, because in the first interview, he tells the New York Times reporter, I fear for my life, and I think I've been receiving threats. And you have this clip of one of these land grabbers saying that we're going to stay here even if someone has to die. And then a few months later, this farmer is tragically murdered. It's almost comical in how it unfolded.
See, the one thing that I really dislike about this type of thing is not the case of. Don't get me wrong when I say this, because I do care about what happens to the actual people, but so much of the case of that it's happened to the people. You can not understand it, but that it's happening and it's there. You can understand what's going on to an instant or a degree, but when it comes to the point of when the leader of the country says categorically in an interview, there is none of white people being killed because of land. There is no white farmers being killed or any type of farmers being killed because of their color. And none of this is happening. All the cases.
And no land grabs are happening.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going to go next. That none of these land grabs are actually happening at all. But yet there's so many different stories, as you quite rightly said, that prove him categorically a liar. And people want to say that this is a good leader for South Africa when they moan about Trump misleading the truth. He is categorically stating that there is no truth. He is lying by definition.
Yeah, this is the equivalent of if you had, let's take a very, like something that would make international headlines. Let's say that in the United States, there were roving bands of white nationalists and they were killing Muslim Americans, or like they were, they were like, let's say in the past, okay, let's make it a bit more, this will actually really hammer home the point. Let's say that 50 black journalists were murdered in America last year, and then by some by white nationalists, some by crime, whatever. But let's say 50 black journalists were murdered in America last year, and then Trump goes onto the world stage, and he's asked about it, and he says no black journalists have been murdered in my country. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. I know.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
no, that's the sad thing of it.
Like, I'm still open to have a debate about what should be the countermeasures, how severe is the problem, what are the actual stats we can go into, where the numbers are coming from. I'm really open to that debate. That's fine. But when you're going to go to that point where you're just saying, no, it's just not happening, there's nothing, it's a non-issue, it's a non-existent issue, then it starts getting into the realm of the absurd. Then I can't really have a discussion with that type of person. I can't debate that person because they're denying something that, to the point where it's not even, they're saying it's not as serious, which I can understand why people would argue that. They're saying it's non-existent, it's not there, it doesn't happen.
So the Stellenbosch person that you were
yes.
Talking, sorry?
Excuse me.
The gentleman that you were talking about. Sorry?
You cut off a little bit there.
Yeah, I always cut off. the Stellenbosch, is that the person that you're talking about?
Stellenbosch is the town's name.
Right. Because I didn't know this because I had to Google it because, outside. You didn't mention that was the wine area of South Africa.
Yes.
I'm guessing one of the most rich and fertile lands, as well as obviously offshooting and selling internationally, that those lands can actually have. And people are taking over the lands to be able to build shacks on them.
And if you take it into historical context, it's even more bizarre. So just type in, for example, map of South Africa, Put that on the screen. I'll give you some context that's actually really mind-blowing.
So, map of South Africa.
Yeah, just an ordinary map of South Africa. Just put that image on the screen. So I'll show you where this is, and then historically why it's even more bizarre that this happened.
Does it matter what particular one?
No, just like as long as the outline of South Africa is there, that's all I need.
Nah. I can't actually get one that's actually big enough to be able to... Not links to a different fucking website for anything. All of them just link to a bloody new website.
Okay, but I think I'll link you to an image then. I've got it here. This one's perfect.
Yay.
Copy image address. Okay, cool. I'm just going to put it in the private chat here.
Oh, in the private chat. That's fine. I can deal with that one.
So this map is going to do two things. So you can put that on the screen, and I'll show you what this all is about, what actually makes it very interesting.
Ah, there we go.
All right.
All right, I will get there now. All right, back to that one. That can go down. Honestly, guys, I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional. Honest. All right, there we go.
All right. All right, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll describe where Stellenbosch is. You can't really miss it. It's down there at the bottom left. Like very bottom left. Like
here.
Can you hold your mouse there? Yeah. It's pretty much there somewhere. Not like on the coast, a little bit inwards. Like in that region. It's like there. This map shows the black population of South Africa according to the South African census of 2011. So this is where black South Africans live, according to the census of 10 years ago. That little spot down there where Stellenbosch is, where all these fertile lands is, was never historically inhabited by black South Africans. If you look at this map, you can see where they are living.
Yeah.
They're pretty much desert that stopped their migration there. So that's why you have this type of concentration. And the little dots down there is pretty much just contemporary immigration due to labor and for jobs. But that whole white area there is historically was not populated by black South Africans. The only people that lived there for the majority I've got the coronavirus of South Africa's history were the white settlers and then the coloureds that are a separate ethnic group in South Africa, the descendants of the original people, the Khoisan, but then also of Malays that were brought here as slaves and of mixed race descendancy. So this land grab took place in a part of South Africa where black South Africans have never lived historically. And even to this day, you can see, you can just use this demographic map as a reference to show you where black South Africans have historically lived, because that's where they still live today.
No, the reason why I brought up the name of the place and the fact that it was wine country and things like that was, as we touched on before, that if you're going to take away generational farmers because of their skin color, like they did in Zimbabwe, then you're going to lose all of that information. You're going to lose all of that products. You're going to lose all of that revenue. If you do the same thing in one country, which is, as far as I remember, now I haven't checked before I say this, so I could be talking out my ass. But as far as I know, it's one of your biggest, not the biggest, because I think that's milk and bread and things like that, but one of your biggest exports.
Yes, grape products, like even table grapes, wines, grape juices. It's a very big industry in South Africa. It's a large chunk of the agricultural industry. And yeah, man, it's a very complex thing when it comes to this, because you get to this point where I think you can take the map off the screen. I think I've made my point there.
Never. It's staying there forever.
It's my map now. So yeah, where it gets complex is that if you look at the stats, it's actually I'm going to go way off topic. I'm stopping myself before I go into that tangent. So if you look at the stats, I can send you the links. The majority of Black South Africans, when they're talking about land and land reform, they're actually talking about urban land, not rural land. There's not a hunger for rural land.
Right.
The majority of Black South Africans want to live where there are jobs and where there are communities already established, but in an urban sense, where they can have that urban life and they can go to, and not just go to tiny little shops in the rural areas. They want to have that city experience and all the benefits that come with living in a city.
Yeah.
So if you look at official polling, the very, very thorough polling, Black South Africans don't want to live in the countryside. They don't want to live in the rural areas. But now, for political reasons, you have these land grabs on rural areas because historically it's much more symbolic. But it's not what they want. It's they want to be close to industry. They want to be close to jobs. There was a poll that was done, I think it was 2 years ago, by the Institute of Race Relations in South Africa, and they asked, I think, a sample of 5,000 South Africans, randomly selected. They asked them what should be prioritized in South Africa by the government to solve South Africa's problems. Number one was jobs. Number two was education. Number three was crime. Land was all the way at the bottom with 1%.
So they really didn't give a shit about it.
This is publicly available information. You can Google Institute of Race Relations polling hunger for land, and you'll get this. And all their methodology is up there on display. So if you are like an academic and you really want to go into the validity of the information, it is all there to nitpick as you will. But the average South African, I can tell you now by looking at the stats, doesn't care about land. The average South African cares about having a job, having a good education for their children, and their family being safe.
Just like every fucker else. And speaking about every fucker else, what is your plans for the future, Mr. Average African?
Well, I wish I was average South American. That would really turn this interview on its head. I was lying all this time. So my big plans for the year is I want to continue with what I was doing last year, but I want to ramp it up to a next level. So for example, last year I think I wrote 5 opinion pieces, and this year I want to write 10 on specific issues that I think are important for the discourse in South Africa at the moment. And then secondly, I want to get back to streaming again. Now that I've discovered Streamlabs, I think I'll be able to do that again in the near future. And then otherwise, my other big goal would just be to be that go-to guy. When you want to know what's happening on the ground in South Africa, I want to be a respected voice when it comes to that. So that I do my research, and I do a lot of research into what the facts are, what is happening on the ground, and I can tell you my own personal experience as well if you want more of a subjective angle on what's going on. But it's like I said, I'm not a politician. I don't work for a political party. I don't really benefit from, for example, let's take the example like farm murders. I don't live on a farm. I'm not a farmer, but I am an Afrikaner. I care about people that live on farms because it's part of my culture. But I'm not doing this for my own safety. It's not something doesn't really affect me personally, except on more of an abstract cultural level. But it's something that I think needs to be solved. And land expropriation as well doesn't affect me. I don't own land. I rent a house, dude, or I rent a place. So it's not like my land can be taken, but I understand the repercussions of it and the widespread repercussions that it will have, and eventually how it will affect me as well, and how it will affect the people around me and my country that I love very much. So I think that's where my motivation for this comes from, is that I'm not out here trying to get support from my political party or to make money out of this. I don't know how I can make money out of this, but I don't even have super chats on my YouTube channel yet, man.
I suppose I could ask you along the questions. So you're trying to be a much more well-informed Tim Paul. I mean, well-informed, not.
I haven't watched Tim Pool in a long while, man. And don't tell me he's like gone off the deep end.
Bits and pieces. He's a bit. I don't know. I mean, once you give your opinion on a YouTuber, apparently, you're the scum of the earth.
No, man. I'm unfortunately not a journalist, so I can't really call myself like an investigative journalist. But I'm trying my best to get the facts out there. Like I said, everything I say, if anyone is curious about where I get a figure, where I get a story, where I get something that I referenced, I will gladly give you the source. It's just a little bit weird. Like while I'm talking, I can't just say, okay, go check this out. Like here's a footnote, here's a footnote. That's why I prefer writing over really doing interviews. Because when I write, I can put footnotes into what I write. So people who don't have to go check it or don't have to go looking for something, it's already there. I wish when I was doing like an interview with you, everything I said was like there was little footnotes at the bottom of the screen. That would be amazing. But if anything, if I make like any claim that's particularly interesting or almost unbelievable, if anyone asks in the chat about it, I will definitely link you to it. But everything that I cite are things that I've already talked about on my social media. So the sources I've already posted there. So I don't think that's like new, or it's not information that people would be skeptical about, seeing as I've already pretty much covered these topics for years now. So, but yeah, it's definitely something that I enjoy doing. Just getting people to understand what's going on here, and just like as soon as my streaming is up to scratch again, you're welcome to come on my channel and we can talk a bit more about British politics, and it'll be my turn to shut up and listen.
Yeah. I'll leave that one there. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, let's say, the philosophical ideology that comes across here. So when we have been talking about this, we could say that most of this seems to be of a case of, in most countries, in fact, you could probably put this down to all countries, the idea of racism or the idea of otherisms, as in we find what is different from us and then we classify that as what's bad. What I was going to go across and try and ask for you on this one is, for South Africa in itself, it seems that there is a lot of othering of one description or another. Do you think that the reason why the othering seems to be happening is because it's easy to be able to stoke up animosity and cause an emotional reaction that doesn't cause people to actually think about what's going on, and that emotional reaction can then be corralled into the right direction that they want you to be, or they want you to be?
I think what you said there, I think you answered your question to a large extent, actually. There, it's along the lines of what I would have said as well. But I do think something that I can add in regards to that answer is that if you look at human history, that's how it's always worked. We are hardwired to distrust anyone that doesn't look like us or dresses differently than us or has a different culture than us. Because for thousands of years, if someone came over the hill and they don't look like you, they're probably here to take everything you have and kill you. So I do have sympathy for the human race when it comes to these types of prejudices, because I understand where they come from. I understand that it's your lizard brain screaming. It's that little ancient piece of your brain that's still there. You think of yourself as this modern being and this tuxedo wearing, sophisticated, civilized person, but you're still an ancient man at the back of your mind. There's still that ancient part of your brain, and it's going to take thousands of years for us to get rid of that, even if we are able to get rid of it, that part of us. And I think, modern life, even let's take something a bit more specific, the multicultural state that we see today, for example, South Africa, a multicultural democracy, is something very recent. It's not something that was common throughout history. So the problems that we're trying to solve, and the things that we're seeing pop up now with this type of new system and this type of new demographic society, are very alien to us in the bigger picture. It's this tiny window in history, but it wasn't that way for a long while.
Mm.
So I think a lot of the solutions that we're working on in South Africa in regards to how do you live in harmony with other cultures, how do you really have a tolerant society, which parts of cultural difference do you tolerate, and where do you put your foot down, those types of questions are being debated and hopefully in the future answered in South Africa. So I think with the cultural progress and the democratic progress and the societal progress we're making, even in a small regard, can be used in the future by other societies to try and solve their problems as well. Especially in a globalizing world where it seems that a diverse society is going to be what your society is going to be in the future. And then your best bet then is we need to look at countries where it's already happened and see how those cultures are dealing with it. Specifically, minorities in countries. I think South Africa is an excellent case study if you are interested in how minority cultures and minority languages survive. My own home language, for the people that haven't noticed, I've been doing this entire interview translating as I go in my head. My home language of Afrikaans is a minority language in South Africa. It's the third most spoken language in South Africa. I think 7 million people in South Africa speak it out of a population of 60 million. And it's a language that is being removed from universities and from public education, and that puts the language under threat. It's not a language that's growing very rapidly. It's a linguistic minority. And then you go to my culture, which is Afrikaner, which is an even smaller minority. It is only 2.7 million out of 60 million. There's about 4.5 million whites in South Africa, and 2.7 of those 4.5 million are Afrikaners.
Wow.
So those are Afrikaans-speaking whites, a majority of Dutch, German, and French descent. And so what we're seeing here in South Africa, which is very interesting, is how do these cultural minorities, and I'm just naming my own case, but there are countless other cultural minorities as well, how do they operate within this multicultural democracy? How do they preserve their cultures? How do they preserve their languages? And how do they live in harmony with a majority that sometimes appears to be very hostile towards their existence? Like, for example, where you see
of my question that I would put on to next, which would be, we can understand that there are differences and people are going to play on them. My theory is that with the people that are playing on these, as you said, innate features of humanity in itself to push them to the forefront, I see that there are two groups massively that seem to be doing this. One is a case of what they can use as political gain. They may or may not actually believe what they're saying, or may not actually even push it as the relevancy for doing it. They're just using it for their own gain. And I see the other one, which I think is even more dangerous than the previous, is a case of they see that racism has happened in the past, and they think an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth will make what happened before better. Did you see something similar to that, or am I way off on that?
No, that's what we're seeing in South Africa, is that they use the past as justification for the present. But it's, as I always say, you can't fill one pothole by digging another one and using that what you digged up to fill the old one, because then you just end up with another pothole. And it's almost like that. There's this theory in psychology of abused children become abusers themselves. And I think you do see it in societies where you have a new type of regime taking over and then taking revenge for what the previous order did. And then you just sow the seeds of future hate, and for the next generation to then try and oppress the others through some type of retribution that they feel.
Completely agree with. Just to quickly jump on with that, just to draw a comparison for people that are in the UK. Anybody that thinks that doesn't happen, Labour, minors, Tories. That's simple. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to contextualize it there. And what you see in South Africa, for example, I'm just going to briefly touch on it because I can talk for hours on this topic. what you see, for example, with the Boer War in South Africa, where you have Afrikaners being put into concentration camps, a lot of people actually then connect that to apartheid, where you have this abused generation and they grow up resentful and want to take their destiny into their own hands because their destiny was ripped from them, and then you get this vicious cycle. But that's a completely different topic for another day. Like I said, I can go into much more nuanced take on that, but it's in South Africa. I wrote an opinion piece on this, on specifically how we solve our current predicament in South Africa, and you're not going to be able to solve it through trying to write the tyrannies of the past with tyrannies in the present. That's not how it works. You're just creating a new generation of disadvantaged people that are not going to be very fond of you and are going to want to take revenge in some form. And then you're not going to have a society where there's actually dialogue or people actually working together. You're just going to have a bunch of groups despising each other because every group has oppressed the other group in some time in the history.
No, that's exactly where I was going to go with next. Exactly what you've just said. You can translate the idea of what's going on with racism or the idea of othering with the idea of feminism, with the idea of MRAs, with the idea of there is an opposite and a reaction. And both of them are now so reactionary to each other that they can't find commonality between themselves to be able to actually do what's best for both groups. They want to fight to push one off the edge rather than actually work together.
Yeah. And that's what you see with the right and the left specifically now in contemporary times. You see the two fringes pretty much point at each other and say, but look how radical they are. You need to come join us. We'll keep you safe. And then the other guys point to them and say, look how many people are joining that fringe. They want to kill you. Come to our side. We'll keep you safe. And they just use each other as propaganda.
No, I completely agree with you. And Signlinder has made another exceptionally great point in the chat, which I think is absolutely poignant for this. Politicians and mainstream media are the main drivers of a racial tension. I think they are the main drivers for pushing people apart, for othering people, just in general. Look at the idea from the Joker movie, for instance. The idea of pushing people down and laughing at them in general, to the idea of elevating people that matter, as in elevating the rich, elevating so on and so forth, the whites or the blacks or whoever they want to put as the top tier groups. And you just see that constantly. The media is what is dividing us, not necessarily us in general. Because you look at Twitter, you look at how we think that those are representatives of how people actually react in real life. And you talk to people in real life, and you're like, you're not actually like that, are you? And it just seems to be, as you quite rightly said, the two radicals that are trying to fight each other in the middle, and it just doesn't work. And the media are perpetuating that, at least in my opinion on that one anyway.
No, in South Africa, it's for two different reasons. I think it's definitely a poignant point. Politicians are actually using racial tensions and flaming racial tensions to gain power and to be able to other groups and to be able to terrify other groups and say, well, I mean, and this you can Google for yourself as well. The president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, said, I don't know when, this was a while back, he said, if you don't vote for the ANC, the Boers are going to come back and oppress you. And this is exactly what you're talking about. And this is the president of South Africa saying this. And it's a very, very effective propaganda tactic. You're playing on the fears of people, and you're playing on the very delicate position in South Africa where we have a history of groups oppressing each other and then saying, but you don't want to go back to that. You better vote for us. And then what we're seeing, that's the political side of it. Then you see the media side where there's actually a profit motive, not a power motive, where clickbait sells, outrage sells, man, negativity sells, positivity doesn't sell. You don't get if some guy vaccinates 50 children for free for malaria, that's not going to be on the front page. No. Some guy in a racial rage goes and kills 50 children of another group. Now that's going to be on the front page.
Of course.
One guy saved 50 people, one guy killed 50 people. But the negative story, definitely front page, because that's going to get clicks, that's going to sell papers. And that's where the sinister side of the media comes out. I don't think all of it is intentional. I don't think they are intentionally being evil and spreading like hate and racial and flaming racial tensions. It is just a byproduct of their business model. Their business model is to be outrageous. Their business model is almost like the tabloids. The mainstream media is becoming increasingly tabloidized, where they are just getting those headlines because they know people don't read the actual article. People read the headline. And like, for example, a good example from where this happened was here in South Africa this year. So one of the leaders of the opposition, Helen Zille, she tweeted a cartoon on Twitter that pretty much made fun of racial stereotypes. It was an anti-racial stereotype cartoon. But then the media went with the headline, Helen Zille posts racial stereotype cartoon. You see how they twisted it? It's an anti-racial stereotype cartoon, but they're not lying, but they're lying by omission. They're making an outrageous headline that's not true.
Yeah. And then people only remember the headline because they didn't read the story. So you're like, oh, well, she posted that racist cartoon. No, she didn't. It was an anti-racist cartoon. No, I completely unitedly with you on that one. We're coming up to about 5 minutes before we're going to finish because I've got to go to bed and the missus will probably beat the shit out of me.
Just before you go there, I just saw in the chat that J Willie series says, Ek verstaan Conscious Caracal, ek praat Afrikaans, solank julle praat stadig. So nee, ek wil maar net sê, dankie dat jy kom inluister het. Ek kan nou nie ongelukkig nie, ek dink meer Engelse mense as Afrikaanse mense luister, maar dankie dat jy ook kom luister het, J Willie series. Ek waardeer die feit dat jy nog heeltyd hier saam met ons stiek. So I just gave him a little bit of a thank you in Afrikaans for listening to the entire show.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm sure he does as well. Is there anything else that you'd want to, I say shield because it's just easier that way. Is there anything else that you want to shield for yourself while we're here?
Basically just, I think everyone that listened know who I am in terms of where to find me. But if you are for the first time now exposed to my radical views, you can go find me on Twitter, Conscious Caracal, and you can find me on YouTube under the same name. Or if you want to read my opinion pieces, you can just Google Adams van Zyl analysis or opinion piece, and you'll probably find some. But I also share all of them on my social media, so you'll probably know about them when they come out. But yeah, for me, it's not about the exposure for myself. It's more of just the exposure for the facts and the truth. And thank you very much for having me on. It's really nice that people actually still care about South Africa and want to listen.
I definitely do. I think it's important that we listen to every part of the country and every part of the world, because otherwise, if we don't, then we're only going to be, let's say, enveloped in what the media are going to tell us, rather than actually being awoken to what actually is going on in the world. Because if I was only to believe what your president has told me, then I wouldn't think that there's anything fucking wrong with your country, as in the point of nationalization or farms being, farmers being killed and whatnot, and so on and so forth. I think there's nothing wrong. But speaking to you, with the evidence that you can and do provide, I know different. And the more that we're able to do things like this with other people and, increase our circle, use the analogy of the pond, the more that we talk, the more that the ripples are created in the pond, and the more that we can make an effect for good in general. That's all we got to do is just talk to each other more rather than trying to attack each other.
Exactly. And we were talking about it off air, where I said pretty much that is that people don't talk to each other anymore. People just pick their tribe and then that's your team. Blue team, good. Red team, bad. And that's pretty much your entire life defined then. And like I said, if anyone is, I've told you where you can find me on social media. If I cited any stat or any story and you can't find it, just at me on Twitter and I'll send you a link with a source or 2 or 3 or 4 to the story and you can check it out for yourself. Because my motto still remains. I said it last time I was on the show and I'll say it again. Don't just believe what I say, research what I say, and then make up your mind for yourself.
Words to live by as well. Don't just believe what anybody says. Always do your own research and make your own decisions and choices in life, because otherwise
Not
you're
even
just following what somebody else is.
not even what these two mugs on the screen say.
Oh, especially me. I don't fucking know anything. Don't listen to me, for fuck's sake. Right, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, and however you may identify, I will be leaving now. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen and to support us. Thank you very much. Speak to you all again real soon.